Guys, we've been in a series called Family Matters. And we've been talking about family matters because family, help me out, matters. Hey, you guys did way better than first service. Let's try that again, though. We've been talking about family matters because family matters, right? Family's a big deal to God. And so what I want to do is today is I have a message. We're going to be talking about awesome family, okay? Awesome family. You know, a lot of times we're okay with things being average, right? I don't know about you, but a lot of times what I see with people and even in myself, I can be, that was good enough. But I believe that God has not only called us to have awesome families, he's called us to grow into really being an awesome family. And the beautiful thing is this, is that he empowers us to do that very thing. Listen to me, church. God is never going to call you to something that you can't accomplish with him on your side. Okay, let me say it again. You can't accomplish it without him on your side. And so we need to be reliant on him. But I want you to know this is so doable. Because see, average happens by accident. If you just live your life just doing what you were raised to do or what you think is right, you'll probably at best just be average by accident. But awesomeness, is that a word? Awesomeness comes with a fight. It comes with a fight. You know, when I look at the families in Israel, in Jerusalem, they were, thrashed and demolished, and many of them were taken away by the Babylonians into captivity. And there was a remnant that was left, and there was a man named Nehemiah who actually was called to come back and to rebuild the walls. See, these people, they were vulnerable. They were vulnerable to the threats of the enemy because even if you're in a city and you didn't have walls to protect yourself, you were just kind of like, you were dead meat, you were kind of dead in the water. And so God sends Nehemiah to come back and to challenge the people to get on board with this vision that he has to rebuild the walls and to reestablish their greatness in some way to the glory of God. And it's really wild when you read the story because what they did is they separated them by families. And this is the importance of family, is if you go back in Nehemiah 4, you can read a little bit earlier in the chapter, that they were put in place by family to defend certain areas and to rebuild certain areas. And I believe that God has called your family. I'm talking about husband and wife, children. I'm talking about grandparents. I'm talking about aunts and uncles. I believe that God has a mandate and a mission for your family. There's a place for you to stand. There is a place for you to be, to get something done. Do you believe that? Does anybody believe that? Come on. Like, we're not here just by happenstance. We're not just here because, oh man, it's just, mom and dad did their thing and man, and here I am. No, you have a purpose in your life. There is a calling on your life, but I believe that it extends past just you. It extends to the entire family. And Nehemiah begins to challenge them. In Nehemiah 4:14, if I can get that verse up, he says this, don't be afraid of them. Speaking of those who are making threats, speaking of the enemy that is coming against them, he says, don't be afraid of them. And I want to sidestep just for a moment. I want to speak to those of you that are young parents in here, those that are raising teenagers today. I want you to know that you do not have to be afraid to raise your kids in this generation. I often hear Christians like, oh man, what a terrible time to raise my kids. Like, man, I wish that they could have grown up in my time. Well, listen, there wouldn't have been a grace on them to grow up in your time, but there is a grace for them to grow up now. And listen, come on, God has empowered them to endure the mess and the nastiness and the perversion of this generation. There is something, I don't know if you've noticed about this younger generation, they're robust, they're strong, man. I'm going to say they're clever, they're smarter in a lot of ways than we were. And they're that way for a reason because God's grace is upon them. Let me just say, don't be afraid of the enemy that is coming against your family. Don't be afraid of the times that we live in. They're going to be fine. But listen, they will excel and they will honor God if they're part of an awesome family. Listen to this. He says, remember the Lord who is great and awesome. You're not going to do this on your own and they won't either. It's our God who is great and awesome. But listen to this. And Nehemiah instructs them. He says, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. He was commissioning them. He was saying, you need to fight. You need to rise up. You need to do things differently. A fight actually means a struggle. And so some of you, you're going to have to struggle through some things in order to live a different life. To overcome being average, you're going to have to struggle to live in a way that maybe you weren't raised. Some of you weren't raised in the fear and admonition of the Lord. Some of you church was a foreign thought. It was a foreign concept to you. But here you are today. You've been born again. You're saved, and you're trying your best to raise your kids in God's ways. I just commend you today. Come on, church, can we clap it up for these families that are trying to do it differently? These families that are fighting and they're walking down a different path. I want you to know that we're with you, but more importantly, God is with you. Listen to what it says in Nehemiah 4:20. It says, wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. He says, our God will fight for us. So Nehemiah in one moment is telling him, hey, you stand in your place and you be willing to fight. You fight for your wives. You fight for your children. You fight for your sons. You fight for your daughters. He's saying, you got to be willing. And they were. But he said, but when they come, if we start being overran, he says, we're going to blow the trumpet. And he says, we're coming together as a family, speaking of all of us. And he says, and God is going to fight our battle. That's good news for all of us today, that you are not going to do this alone. And I want you to know that Hub City Church, we're behind you. We're here to resource you. We're here to love on you and love on your kids and to speak life and destiny into them. This is a house of hope. This is a house of healing. I believe this with all my heart, that God's presence resides here. And if his presence is here, then life is here as well. Because if you're willing to fight, he will fight for you. And as I was studying, this thought came, and I believe it was of God, and I just want to encourage some of you in this place. You know, family has been difficult for you. It's been hard for you and your spouse to get along. Maybe you had teenagers and you had hopes and dreams when you saw them when they were little. They had such tender hearts, and especially tender hearts towards the things of God. And then now they're teenagers and they just seem like they're stone walls and that they just don't get it. But I want you to know that God has not given up on you, and he hasn't given up on them. And let me encourage you to not give up on them either. And this was the word that I got that I want to share with you, is that the miracle is not in what you lost, but in what you have left. Don't give up. I feel like that's from the Lord directly to you today. The miracle that you're seeking, it's not in what you've lost, it's in what you have left. And if you have each other, and if you have God on your side, then you've got more than enough, family. Do you believe that today? That if you've got God on your side, if you've got each other, you've got more than enough. Keep fighting. Don't give up. Don't give up on one another. It's worth it to keep pressing through, to see godly generations take hold of their calling and to see generations changed. As we see revival breaking out in certain places throughout our nation, that was because somebody poured into that young generation. Somebody didn't give up on them. Somebody set course and pace and showed them what it was that they needed to do to be an awesome family. So I have 3 things I want to share with you guys today when it comes to fighting for an awesome family. Number 1 is this, is that awesome families are playful. Let me preface this whole message with this. I just felt that I was called to come today and to bring some practical stuff to you. See, sometimes we only preach concept, and it's like conceptually, you're like, yeah, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. That's inspiring. How do we do it? I want to make this a nuts and bolts message. I want you to walk away going, you know what? I feel inspired, but I also feel empowered to live this thing out. So awesome families are playful. They know how to have fun. They know how to enjoy life. And I believe that that's a missing ingredient to a lot of families today, is that we don't know how to have fun. We don't know how to kind of just pull our hair back a little bit and just have a blast with one another. Many times we're too busy. We're too tired. We're too negative. We're too worn out, and we're too serious. And I believe that awesome families know how to tap into this thing of having a great time together, learning to laugh, not always working. You know, we've got to learn to work, but we also have to learn to play as well. And awesome families are great at this. You know, some of my earliest memories, I grew up in a great home. My mom and dad gave their life to Christ when I was 5 years old. And I started to see that things really changed. And my dad has one of the most infectious laughs ever. If you know my dad, you know that to be true, man. My dad, if he starts laughing, you can't help but laugh. Do you guys know anybody like that? See, laughing's infectious. Just turn to your neighbor and just laugh real quick. Yeah. It just made me laugh, and I didn't even catch one specific laugh there. But it is a reality. And my dad, I remember some of the earliest memories because he was intentional about setting a culture in our home where we laughed and had a great time. I remember as a young kid, we would sit on the couch, and you would think that the cartoons were for kids. No, the cartoons were from my dad. My dad would watch Looney Tunes, right? 10 a.m. every Saturday, man. We were like just cracking up. And half the time I thought like the cartoon was funny, but I thought he was funnier. I just want to challenge you today that if your home is serious and you haven't made this a part of what you do, come on, you got to start moving toward it. You got to find ways to have fun. My mom and dad were great at taking us on certain trips. We didn't have much money. I like to say we grew up in a home, we always had what we needed, rarely what we wanted. Did you grow up in that home too? So it was like, I'm not dogging them, I'm just saying like we grew up of humble means, but yet my mom and dad always found a way to create experiences and opportunities for us to enjoy each other and enjoy our life. Remember, sometimes after church, we'd head to the park. Sometimes after church, we'd go to the beach. Sometimes we'd go to the mountains. There were camping trips. I remember twice a year, there were two things that were sure, man. We were going to Lake Mead on Memorial Day. We were going to Lake Mead on Labor Day. And I look forward to that. And even when my kids were growing up, where did we go? We went to Lake Mead on Memorial Day and Lake Mead on Labor Day, right? Because they started a culture of having fun, and we'd go out there and be on the lake and do what we did. And so I honor my parents for that. When I was raising my two little ones, we had this thing called Cave of Wonders. Anybody know what Cave of Wonders is? It was from Aladdin, right? And so it was basically at night before they went to bed, we would put big old sheets over the top of this big bed we had, and we would create a cave in there, and I'd read stories and tell them scary stories. I shouldn't admit to that, but Dad, tell me a scary story. I don't want a happy story. I'm scared. And then the whole night I was like, man, why did I tell them that? They keep coming around my bed. Dad, I'm so scared. But we created a memory, right? So I'm not saying tell scary stories, but my point is this, is that are there certain things that you do that are what you do? There's certain code words, or there's certain nicknames, or there's certain things that you've set aside. And if you haven't done this yet, family, let me just encourage you. You have to start doing this. There has to be things that are unique about your family that surround being playful. For those of you that are single here, you're saying, well, this is not relevant to me. Well, you're a part of a family too. I believe that family is not just a husband and wife. I believe it's husband, wife, grandparents. I believe it's aunts and uncles. You have influence to bring fun and to bring joy into your nieces and nephews or into your siblings. This is something that we all are a part of. I'm not talking about just the nuclear family, those who live in a home. I'm talking about the extended family as well. Are we willing to do that? Those of you that are grandparents, are there certain things that you do with your grandchildren that they don't get to do with mom and dad? Is there a culture of playfulness and joy that's being, built amongst them and yourself? This is so important. See, in Ecclesiastes, not Ephesians, Ecclesiastes 8:15, Solomon was known as the wisest man to ever live, and this is what he actually had to say, so let's listen up. He says, so I recommend having fun, because there is nothing better for people in this world than to eat, drink, and enjoy life. That way they will experience some happiness along with all the hard work God gives them under the sun. We understand that we have to work. We understand that we all have responsibilities. There's bills to be paid, right? There's things to be handled, but we can't forget this part, that God has provided a way for us to have happiness, to experience joy, to have fun with one another. This pleases his heart. I remember looking at my kids and man, they were annoying sometimes. Come on, let's be real. I'd get home from work after a long day of listening to other people gripe all day, and then I'd walk in the door and I can hear, no, that's mine, get out of my room. And they're in there doing things, and I was like, oh, this is so annoying. But then there were many other times, because my kids were good kids, but there were many other times where I'd walk in and there was just peace in the home. And I could hear them upstairs, and they're just laughing. They're cracking up. And it just brought so much joy to my heart. One is that I didn't have to go spank them. No, I'm just kidding. And two was it just brought joy to my heart because that unity and the love that they were expressing for one another, I knew that would carry on for generations. So just simply say this: if you want to be average, keep doing what you're doing. If you want to have an awesome family, you've got to create an environment where it is fun, because God has given you a family to be enjoyed, not only endured, people. The second thing is this, is when it comes to an awesome family, is that awesome families encourage growth. Awesome families encourage growth. Okay, I'm not talking about just growth like, oh man, Mijo, you're getting so tall. It's like, okay, well, that's cool. Or, we just found out, like, we're super stoked. We just found out that we have our third grandchild coming soon. And we're super excited about that. Another little baby girl's on the way. And so, yeah, come on. That's cool. Love that God is growing our family. But that's not really the growth that I'm encouraging, even though sometimes we're like, as grandparents, we're like, yes, man, have another one. That's awesome. We love them. It's so much fun. But I'm talking about personal growth. I'm talking about you growing as a person. Let me remind you, we're not looking to be average. We're looking to be awesome. And there's some things in Scripture that I see that are really cool when you look at the life of Jesus. In Luke chapter 2, verse 52, it's kind of cool. It says, and Jesus grew, so remember we're talking about growing, and Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, and in favor with God and man. And there's 4 things I just want to touch on real quick. Like I said, I'm going to give you a lot of info. You can snap a picture of it, or you can take notes, which I like that option better. But if I can get to my next slide, I want you to see this, that it breaks it down, is that we want to encourage our family members. I'm talking about your kids, your spouse, aunts, uncles, grandparents. I want this to, and I believe God wants this to happen in all of our families, is that we grow in wisdom, that there's intellectual growth that happens. Let me just simply ask you this. Are there things that you know today that you didn't know last year? Are there things that your children, are there techniques and tactics and strategies that God has given you? Things that you've learned from reading a book or maybe listening to a podcast or watching something. Have you learned something in the last year that you didn't know last year? In this last year that you didn't know last year. Are you growing in this way? Are you becoming smarter? Are you becoming sharper? Are you becoming more intelligent? Well, we understand according to Scripture, Jesus did. And I think that if he did, I think it's good if we do as well. The second thing is stature. That means physical health. So it says Jesus grew in stature, but I believe that applies to our lives too. So let me simply ask you this. Are there decisions that you've made last year that are producing the results that you want to see this year physically? You go, oh, well, here comes the topic of weight. And that's not all I'm talking about. Are you doing things being mindful that I've got one life to live and that I've got to ensure that this thing that I've been gifted with, that I can do my best to make sure this thing holds together for as long as it can? Okay, so are you making decisions? Are you learning things? Like maybe you didn't know that certain foods, you thought that those were actually good, like, Krispy Kreme. Like those are, guys, those aren't vegetables, man. Like it's not fruit either. They're sweet, but they're not. And so maybe you're learning things and you're going, you know what, we're going to make some changes in our family. Why? Because we are going to grow together because we're an awesome family. We're going to grow in stature. We're going to take care of our bodies and we're going to teach our youngsters to do that. Okay, another thing is favor with God, spiritual growth. Simple. Do you feel closer to God now than you did last year? Do you feel closer to God right now than you did last month? Are you moving forward? Are you growing in your faith? And also, are you providing a way for your children to grow as well? Sometimes you're going, man, I don't know how to reach them. Man, get them to youth group. I don't know how to reach them. Get them into kids' church. Let other voices and others who love Jesus influence them as well. This is a big part of it. And so we want to make sure that we are finding favor with God, but also favor with man, social growth. This is a big deal. Because a lot of us, we tend to be isolators, right? We like to be little hermits, or some of us are bigger hermits than other hermits, but we like to kind of be hermits, and we like to keep to ourselves and even keep our families to ourselves, and it's just us four and no more. But in reality, God has called you to grow in that social aspect, to be people that are known in the city, to be people that are making a difference, not just as an individual, but collectively as a family. And when we teach our kids that it's okay to make friends and we empower them with the tools to be friendly and to receive friendship and love from others, even at the risk of it, right? Because then they can get their feelings hurt. And sometimes we want to shield them and we want to protect them and we want to keep them from anything that's going to make them feel bad or damage their emotions. But in reality, what we're actually doing is we're stunting their growth and we become an average family instead of an awesome family. Got to trust God with this, but we need to grow in these areas. It's a big deal. Am I reaching anybody out there today? So continuing in the thought with growth, this is kind of more of my heavy point that I'm on today. But there's some things that you need to know that there's certain things that you can only learn in a family context that actually is a healthy place to learn them. And I have a couple things that I want to share with you as we continue about growth. So obviously we want to grow as Jesus did. And there's some things that I want you to see the value of your home right now, okay? Are we good with that? So when it comes to things that you can only learn in your family, is you learn what to do with feelings. Okay, so as a child, often, what's one of the most annoying things, parents? Come on, help me out. Crying, right? They cry, keep you up. It starts as soon as they come home. And it never ends. I mean, even when they're adults, it's weird. I'm messing around. But crying is okay. And expressing emotions is okay. But being ruled and led by emotions is not. And think about it, that in the healthy context of a family, an awesome family, they learn how to use their emotions in a healthy way. But when you don't learn it in the house, what happens? You learn it out there in this harsh world. And that's where you have emotional outbursts and all these people doing crazy stuff and anger and rage and all this. That's the reason that they're doing that out there is because they never learned how to keep it under control in the home. And so you have a responsibility. I have a responsibility that we teach our generations. We help them grow by teaching them how to manage their feelings, how to handle the feelings, how to let it go, how to let it kind of pop out, and then how to actually use it instead of suppressing it. Because see, some of you either learn to be a skunk or a turtle, man. Skunks, what do? They just blow, right? And that's what you do with your emotions, man. You're just blowing all over everybody, man, stinking the place up. And then others are turtles, man. You hide and you suck everything in and you keep all of your emotions in. Neither one of those are healthy. So we've got to learn, and we also have to teach our generations how to properly manage our emotions. Another thing is how to handle conflict. So this happens in the home. This is the value of your home. I want you to see this. This is the value, is that you teach them how to handle conflict. So you model it. So instead of just throwing blows and throwing dishes and curse words and everything else when you're upset and there's conflict, you learn to actually use self-control and letting the fruit of the Spirit be evident in your own home. But here's the beautiful thing, is that what happens when you do throw some curse words? And what happens when you do slam some doors and you peel out and take off and the kids are scared and his dad coming back home and you've made those mistakes? What do you do then? They watch you come back and say, I'm sorry. Baby, I'm sorry that happened, and I promise I'm going to do my best to not let that happen again. And you don't just do that privately, you do it publicly in front of them. Because what you're doing is you're teaching them how to handle conflict. You're teaching them that sometimes people don't get along, and that's okay. But the way that we actually work it out is the gold that they're actually going to take with them. And so we have to understand that we're growing in that way. Another thing that they get in the home and only in the home is how to handle loss. You know, grief is a really hard thing when you lose somebody that you love deeply. And I think it's important that in the family context, we learn how to handle loss. And that it's okay to cry and it's okay to be sad. You know, I did a funeral recently and it really, it saddened me because the people kept going, every time they'd get emotional, they go, I'm so sorry. So, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. And I was like, why are you apologizing? This funeral, this is where this is supposed to happen. But all they were told their entire life is that the way that you handle loss and grief is that you just just suck it up and just be tough, man. So they were taught wrongly. And seeing in the home, we can teach this generation it's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. Man, you lost the game. It's okay to be a little bit emotional. And cry it out. Jump in the car and let's get ready for next week's game. Instead, what do? It's like, hey, man, you big sissy, stop crying, you baby. Right? I'm going to slap you around. I'm going to give you something to cry about, right? And so we teach them that their loss, the only way you deal with it is you just hide it. And they just become a bunch of hiders of loss. And one of the sad things, too, is that because we're such an achievement-oriented, society and culture, what we do is we only praise the streak of wins. And what it does is it damages them in the future because you also have to learn how to lose in the context of a home. I was sharing this with last service. The valedictorian at my school, it was this really cool girl. She was super smart, obviously. I wasn't valedictorian, she was. And graduated in 1994. Slogan was too good to ignore. I bought in, man. Hook, line, and sinker, man. It was too good to ignore. But, I found out later that this particular girl, she had a full ride academic scholarship to a really prestigious school. In the first couple weeks of her being at that college, a professor challenged her and didn't give her an A like everybody else had. And she was so distraught and so disturbed. You know what she did? She quit college and never returned. Because she didn't know how to handle loss. She didn't know how to take it because she was always used to everybody praising her, praising her, praising her, praising her. Listen, in the context of home, parents, don't shield your kids from loss. Don't shield them from grief because it's going to help them grow. Why? Because awesome families encourage growth. And here was the last thing, if I can get that up, is how things that you learn in a family is good habits. Good habits are a big deal. And, it's, like there was a phrase that says that manners make the man. And it's important that we teach them values, godly values in the home. So I want to move on to the third thing that we learned today from Scripture about an awesome family, and it's that awesome families protect each other. Awesome families protect each other. This is a big deal. In Matthew 5:45, Jesus paints a clear picture about this life. If I can get you to get that up. And if I could have you come up, Pastor Joe, that'd be awesome. This is Jesus' words. He says that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. I want you to know that in life, I think you've figured this out already, but I'm just going to affirm it, is that you and I will face difficult situations. It doesn't matter if you're a good person or a bad person. That's what Scripture is saying. Good and evil, righteous and unrighteous. It says that it's going to rain on you, that there's going to be days that things come upon you and you're like, man, how did we plan for this? We got sideswiped. It's like my wife got diagnosed with this thing, or my husband was diagnosed, or we were just moving along and we had dreams. We even had a budget, and then my husband lost his job. What's going on? Man, I got a call from the school, and I didn't know that my kids were in the restrooms doing these things. And how do we even process this stuff? I was in my son's room, and I saw this paraphernalia. And I thought he was raised in a good family. And why would he do this? And sometimes in life, you're going to get rained on. Sometimes things are going to come your way and you're like, I don't know what to do. We're in uncharted territory. And it just seems like the road ahead is so dark and seems like there's no path in sight. I don't understand. And it's in that time that awesome families, what do? They come in like an umbrella. And when you can't hold your head up and when you can't hold your own umbrella, they come alongside you and they shield you from the weather. They shield you from the elements. They shield you from the pain, the stinging of being pounded with this situation. They come alongside you and say, you know what? All hope is not lost. Because, Mommy, I remember what you told me, that when I feel alone, that Jesus hasn't forsaken us. Daddy, I want you to know that I remember what you told me, that God has a plan for me, and that if I got breath in my lungs, he's not done with me. I remember when you said that. See, the family dynamic of an awesome family is that when you are at your lowest point, when you feel like you're being pelted with life, when it's raining on your parade, that we come alongside each other and we just shield each other. And one of the beautiful things is that sometimes the most meaningful moments is when somebody comes alongside you and doesn't say a word, but you know they're there. I had this thought that I'd like to share with you. And it was just a simple thought, is that when it comes to protecting one another, is that an awesome family is a familiar face when we land in unfamiliar places. What a thought. See, I'm not only talking about moms and dads and their kids. Yeah, that's there. But what about grandparents? What about parents? What about with your adult children? What about an adult children or an adult child to their aging parent? What about an aunt or an uncle? And you just hear that they're going through a really hard time. Maybe their finances are wrecked. Maybe they had to file bankruptcy. Maybe somebody just got really bad news. And what is our response? Well, I've already raised my kids. They're just going to have to fight through it themselves. Or, it's not my problem. I told him he shouldn't have made that investment. It's not my problem, man. I got enough problems of my own. See, that's an average family. Average family, what do? They neglect and they reject. But awesome families protect each other. You come alongside them, speak life into them, bring joy and hope, remind them of God's faithfulness, remind them of God's goodness and that God is for them. And so you're going to face some storms in this life. There's 3 that I want to go through quickly. 3 storms. The storm of change. That's when it's time to wedge in and be a part of your family. When they're going through dramatic change. One of the most beautiful things when Veronica was diagnosed with cancer at the end of 2020, man, the outpouring of love from our family and our team made all the difference. Man, I looked around and like I said, we were in an unfamiliar place, but there were a lot of familiar faces. It changed my life. It brought hope to us. But not only that, it inspired me to look at my wife and just say, well, no matter what happens, I'm here. And I'll cover you. And I'll hold that umbrella over you in this time. And that was our pledge, and that was our promise to each other on the altar 27 years ago. And it still remains intact today. You married couples out there today, is your covenant still intact with one another right now? No matter what comes your way, I'm here. I'm going to protect you. Hold the umbrella up. You're not going to take the hit. You're not strong enough to hold it up, but I am. And there may be a day when the roles are reversed. But understand that change comes. And understand that you're, as a family, are going to be the storms of harmful ideas. This is something that you parents, you're going to have to raise up a standard and a shield over your generation today, because there's an all-out assault on the family. Generation Z, it's becoming more vogue to say, well, I don't want to have kids, man, that's disgusting. Kids are gross. We don't even call people mothers now. They're birthers or whatever. It's like, it's insanity. And you're going to have to raise a standard and shield your children from this nonsense. God established at the very beginning of the Bible his roles for a man and for a woman. He's very clear about his roles about gender. He's very clear about our sexuality. He's very clear about our generations. He's very clear about what is good and what is not good, what's appropriate and what's not. He's very clear about what is sin and what is not sinful. And we have an obligation and a duty as parents to shield, to hold that umbrella. And when your kid comes home and says, well, so-and-so, my teacher was saying at school today that there is no God, you don't just go, oh, well, yeah, that's whatever. That's their opinion. No, you tell them the truth. You tell them the truth. You rise up and you take your place and say, you know what? I'm protecting my generations from this nonsense. I will not stand here and allow these harmful ideas to be embedded in their minds and then later on question and wonder why they walked away from Jesus. We've got an obligation. Come on, grandparents, aunts, uncles. When you hear this stuff, often you hear people, well, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to offend anybody. Man, you know what? If it was going to offend them to say, get out of the road, there's a big old diesel coming down the road, get out of there. You would do it, right? If you really saw the danger in it. You're going to be like, oh, I don't want to offend them because they're playing right there with their toys. No, you'd walk over there, yank them out and get out of the road. And you wouldn't even feel bad about it. The problem is that we've lost our perspective on eternity. So we don't see the eternal ramifications of us staying silent in these days. Our generations are out on the road and the enemy's just like, big old semi coming right on. And we're like, oh man, got another job to do. We're so distracted, and we have to learn to protect them because they can't protect themselves. Another storm is the storm of rejection. I kind of want to just close with this thought today. This is so important. I love the fact that when you come to Jesus, one of the beautiful things is that God welcomes you into the family. Throughout the New Testament, Galatians and Ephesians, he talks about adoption. He's adopted us. He's engrafted us into his family. And for a lot of people, including yourselves, we've experienced a tremendous amount of rejection in this lifetime, sadly at the hands of our family. In awesome families, what they do is they protect people not from rejection because it's unavoidable, but they protect them from how they process it. This is really important. Living in such a high achievement society, some of your little baby girls are going to want to join the cheerleading squad, and she's not going to make the cut. Some of you, your baby boy is going to grow up to be that 6-foot kid that plays sports, and he may not be the starter. He may lose his starting spot. And so some of us will be down there at the school. How dare you reject my kid? Man, she was the best one on the team. He was the best one on the team. And you guys, you don't even know what you passed up on. It's more beneficial when she's crying alone on her bed that night that you go in the room and say, you know what, baby, this rejection doesn't define you. And my love for you didn't change whether you made the squad or you didn't. Super proud of you. It took a lot of courage for you to get out there and be vulnerable in front of all your peers. Son, I want you to know that, yeah, you maybe lost your starting spot, but it's okay because when I go to the games, because I'm going to keep going to them even if you're not starting, I just want you to know that my eye is on your number. And then I'm watching you, and then I'm rooting for you, and I'm believing that there's going to be an opportunity. But even if you don't get in the game, I want you to know that I'm here for you, not here for them. Can you see how you help them process? That's family. We rally around the family. We protect them. We protect them. We guard their way. We guard their hearts. We guard their minds from the attack of the enemy that tells them that they're worthless and that they're not good enough. Some of you parents that have raised your kids and you see your young married couple kids, they've married their spouse. I want to encourage you to speak life into that marriage because they're struggling. They're trying to figure out how to get along and how to raise these babies and all this stuff. It would be so helpful for you to just call one day and say, you know what, I just think you're beautiful. I think you're handsome. I think you're the best. I think that you guys are doing way better than you think you're doing. What is that doing? Putting an umbrella over them when just the weight of the world is crashing down on them. They're being pelted with thoughts. You're worthless. You're a terrible parent. You're a terrible spouse. You guys are going to go broke. How are you going to make this work? They're just being bombarded, and mom and dad just come over. We're here. I believe that God's doing something in your hearts today.